Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Republic of Propaganda. Just wanted to go over this Event 201 exercise, a 3.5 hour pandemic tabletop exercise that stimulated a series of dramatic, scenario-based facilitated discussions confronting difficult, true-to-life dilemmas associated with response to a hypothetical but scientifically plausible pandemic. Yeah, this whole intro is basically this is what we'll do in a few more months. So it's a pretty big coincidence that this happened. Um, 15 global businesses, government, and public health leaders were players in the simulation exercise that highlighted unresolved real-world policy and economic issues that could be solved with sufficient political will, financial investment, and attention now and in the future. Oh boy. So these similar to Clade X, Dark Winter, and Atlantic Storm. Atlantic Storm was in 2005. Biosecurity of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Um, let's see the other ones. Clade X, Dark Winter. Dark Winter was a fictional scenario depicting a covert smallpox attack on U.S. citizens in 2001, shortly before 9/11. And the last one was let's pull it up here at Clade X. There's not too much info on this website, but it was another pandemic tabletop exercise in 2018. So I just wanted to go over the 15 people that were a part of this. First, let's watch the videos.
In the model of the misinformation and disinformation is not impossible.
One thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news.
I personally do not believe.
Alright, so that's an attack on fake news. Which is
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds.
That's all we need to see. You already know that's what happened. So let's go ahead and take a look at all these leaders. We got Adrian Thomas, Public Health, Johnson & Johnson. Avril Haines, Senior Research Scholar at Columbia. Deputy National Security Advisor, served as Assistant to the President and Principal Deputy. Georgetown University Law. Johns Hopkins. She's pretty well connected. We got Brad Connett, joined Henry Schein. U.S. Medical Group. George Gao, Director, Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Very interesting. Glad he weighed in on that. Hashitagi. She also leads strategic initiatives for the office, including partnerships with the World Economic Forum. Held various roles in hospital administration. Very nice to have her on board. Jane Alto, AO, PSM, FAICD, FIPPA, is a member of the board of the Ann Z Bank Clayton UTZ, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and the U.S. Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. It's a lot of things. She was chair of the board of the World Health Organization, the World Health Assembly, and the chair of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Health Committee. So these are all pretty big players, but you never see their faces. Director of Global Occupational Health Services for Marriott International. She talked about how hotels are 5% of the GDP, and any pandemic would be a disaster on the hotel industry. Monetary Authority of Singapore, Levant Thiru. Singapore seems to be the country dealing with this the best right now because they had a lot of respirators lined up. Martin Neutral, Senior Director and Head of Crisis, Emergency and Business Continuity Management for Lufthansa Group Airlines. They were hit hard. Matthew Harrington is Global Chief Operating Officer at Edelman. Good old Edelman. What is Edelman? Edelman is an HR company. PR company, I'm sorry. Public Relations and Marketing Consultancy firm. Notable work. Let's see here. 2000s, they created a front group called Working Families for Walmart, which was said to be a grassroots organization, but was actually funded by Walmart. That's perfect. In the 90s, I wanted to get into, April 1998, reported that Edelman drafted a campaign plan to ensure the state's attorney general did not join antitrust legal actions against Microsoft. Microsoft, that's easy. Run campaigns supporting the Keystone Pipeline, beautiful. And News Corporation during the phone hacking scandal, Crisis Communications. So, just beautiful democracy and, really helping the underdog in this one. Royal Dutch Shell, Starbucks, the government of Saudi Arabia, Red Cross. Basically every corrupt company you can think of, they've been the PR behind it. Let's keep going. Thank you very much, Mr. Harrington. Sophia Borges, UN Foundation Senior Vice President and head of the New York office. And who's under basically martial law right now? New York City. Glad she was a part of that. This says Sophia Borges, but it's actually Chris Elias. This is a different one. President of the Global Development Program for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's interesting, because he might have worked with Edelman at one point. Matthew, when they were in 98 protecting Microsoft. Leads the foundation's efforts to accelerate the delivery of proven healthcare. What do you think that means? Stephen C. Red, Deputy Director for Public Health Service and Implementation Science at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Beautiful. Inaugural Director and Association Dean of the School of Population and Global Health in the Faculty of Medicine and Associate Vice Principal. John McGill, after a 6-year tenure as the Senior Director of Health, Nutrition, and Population Global Practice. It's a weird word to put in there. World Bank Group. These guys are all well connected. We got plenty of videos here. I can put this in the link. This is the Center for Health Security.org, and this was their conclusion. The next severe pandemic will not only cause great illness and loss of life, but could also trigger major cascading economic and societal consequences that would contribute greatly to global impact and suffering. Efforts to prevent such consequences or respond to them as they would unfold will require unprecedented levels of collaboration between governments, international organizations, and the private sector. There have been important efforts to engage the private sector in epidemic and outbreak preparedness at the national or the regional level. However, there are major unmet global vulnerabilities and international system challenges posed by pandemics that will require new robust forms of public-private cooperation to address. The Event 201 pandemic exercise conducted on October 18, 2019, vividly demonstrated a number of these important gaps in pandemic preparedness, as well as some of the elements of solutions between the public and private sectors that will be needed to fill them. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, World Economic Forum, and your favorite, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, jointly propose the following. Governments, international organizations, and businesses should now plan for essential corporate capabilities to be utilized during a large-scale pandemic. Industry, national governments, and international organizations should work together to enhance internationally held stockpiles of medical countermeasures, to enable rapid and equitable distribution during a severe pandemic. The World Health Organization currently has an influenza vaccine virtually stockpiled, with contracts in place with pharmaceutical companies that have agreed to supply vaccines should WHO request them. As one possible approach, this virtual stockpile model could be expanded to augment WHO's ability to distribute vaccines and therapeutics to countries in the greatest need during a severe pandemic. So you got the CEPI, the Gavi, and the WHO all working together during a catastrophic outbreak. Countries, organizations, global transportation companies should work together to maintain travel and trade. Trade and travel are essential to the global economy as well as the national and even local economies, and they should be maintained even in the face of a pandemic. Governments should provide more resources and support for the development and surge manufacturing of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Global business should recognize the economic burden of pandemics and fight for stronger preparedness. International organizations should prioritize reducing economic impacts of epidemics and pandemics. Governments in the private sector should assign a greater priority to developing methods to combat mis- and disinformation prior to the next pandemic response. So it looks like they got it all under control. You get the government to tell private business what to do. You get international organizations to work together with the WHO. We provide more resources. Vaccines is always the best resource. If you know, even if you're hungry, there should be a vaccine for hunger. Governments in the private sector assign greater priority to combating mis- and disinformation. So you control, and then anyone who speaks out against the control, you control them as well. It's a beautiful plan they got there, and there's a ton of information on this, but this was literally done October 18th and 19th. October 18th of last year, and then they all sat around and talked about it. And a couple months later it was released because more and more information is showing that it was in September, October, November, December, one of those months last year it was spreading. Alright, you guys, take care. Republic of Propaganda, out.